to this special session. Special word for Binance, I think, for just doing this, because I think in India, there's so much of talk on innovation, and there's so much of talk on what India needs to do. I think it's also important for people outside India to be aware of the great opportunities which India has to offer. So there's lots of business to talk about, and we'll talk about that. But Rachel, I understand you're coming to Mumbai for the first time?
Coming to Mumbai for the first time.
So I want to hear from you. Give me your first impression when you landed in Mumbai. What was your first impression?
Lively and dynamic was definitely my first impression coming in. I came from UAE, which is a little...
Just the other end.
It's a little sterile in comparison to here, but I've only been here a couple of hours, and I'm very excited to experience more of the city over the course of the next 48 hours.
They say the city never sleeps.
I've heard, and I've only seen it in films before, in documentaries, so I'm so excited to experience a little bit of the flavor and the food, and obviously the people are incredible and have been so welcoming.
Seker, your thoughts? You're the money guy, you keep the money with you, right? So Mumbai is a place where you can make money and you can burn money, right? So what is it that you think about the city of Mumbai? What do you think Mumbai really brings to the India story?
Yeah, it's a great question. Hey guys, so this is not my first trip to Mumbai. I've been here a number of times over the years for work. You're gonna laugh when I say this or not believe me, but actually it's my favorite Indian city.
My favorite Indian city.
He says that to everyone.
I
He's
said that
only saying that to impress Kaustav Bhai, who's here, huh?
Yeah, and for good reason, right? So every city in India has its charm, and it's a country of many local flavors, many local nuances, many local aspirations. But I think Mumbai encapsulates them all in a way that it's hard to find anywhere else. Right?
It's a city of ambition.
City of ambition, it's a melting pot. I think within India, it's one of those melting pots, right? You can get every cuisine across India in Mumbai. You can meet people from all parts of India. So if you come to Mumbai, chances are you'll meet people from all parts of India, and that odds are higher than if you went to any other sort of tier one city, in my view, in my experience. Also, beating heart of finance, beating heart of commerce, beating heart of ideas, I think, across India. So yeah, it's been my favorite city for a long time.
So why don't both of you, rarely does one get an opportunity to be sitting with world leaders in the space of blockchain, with a leading company like Binance, with both of you. Why don't you give this audience some idea of what is it that Binance is in a position to do in order to escalate or contribute to the India growth story? Yeah, Seker, you want to start with that?
I was looking at Rachel, hoping she'd go first. Okay, so we occupy a unique position in this market, and therefore a unique responsibility, right? It is not often, in my lifetime, it's probably the only time I've come across a situation where a single company effectively powers 50% of a market. And 50% of a market or an industry, right, average 50%. That is the fastest growing industry we've seen in a long time. And a frontier industry as well. So it's a confluence of events that doesn't happen except maybe once in a generation. So it's a privilege to be sitting here talking to you on behalf of Binance. And we take that privilege seriously, we take the responsibility really seriously. So what can we bring to a market like India, or to any market, right? Put India aside for a second. I'll come to India's specific issues later. We bring stability. We bring opportunity in the form of product innovation, in the form of education, in the form of empowerment of the everyday person to get involved in this space. We bring ease and convenience of transacting. We bring systems resilience. We bring security. We bring good faith, and we bridge users all over the world with best-in-class global expertise. So what we are in a position to do is bring unmatched liquidity, unmatched product suite availability, strongest customer experience you can encounter in this space, in our humble view, and a commitment to users, right? Despite the scale and size we've grown to, our core focus has always been users, and our core values are, user-focused, to be hardcore in execution, to be humble in service delivery. So these are values that we bring to every market, and in India in particular, the untapped potential, and this gets said about India a lot, but in terms of number of users in India, right? Number of the AUM, the assets under management, I think close to 4 or 5 billion at this point. At the same time that you're seeing digital asset adoption in APAC exceeding 67 to 70%, and India is actually a front runner of that trend for the last 3 to 4 years. So you're seeing massive adoption in India, but still very early stage in terms of number of users and the amount of assets, right? So what we can do is to help that acceleration, to be a responsible partner, not just to users, but to community, to regulators, to government bodies, to policymakers. And we're in a position to bring our global expertise to bear and be part of this, what I hope will be an amazing growth story.
That's a great vision. That's a great vision. But Rachel, what is Binance? I'll tell you honestly, a lot of people who I interact with, and when I start speaking about Binance, there's curiosity, there is inquisitiveness. Everyone knows, okay, this is a big company, second most valuable company of the world. Some argue in the tech spaces. But your engagement with India, what's your vision? Seker gives us the marketing and the business lens to it. In your understanding, where do you see this engagement with India going?
Look, as Seker has already shared, we're in a very privileged and unique position being the largest. But what Binance's true superpower is our positioning as the world's largest local exchange. And we're 8 years old as a business. It's been exponential, the growth we've had. There's been some headwinds. But we're now coming to a stage where while we are still very early in the journey, we're on a direct path to what is mainstream adoption. And India, as Seker shared, is not only the number one fastest growing in terms of crypto adoption at the moment. I think the figures I saw were it's hit 65 million is on track to hit 615 billion in terms of assets on chain in India alone by 2033. But additionally, you have this incredibly tech native population. You have about 11% of the crypto developers that are based in India at the moment.
11%?
11%. There's over 1,000 Web3 startups at this space. You look at founders, such as Sandeep from Polygon, you look at Biconomy, you look at these amazing innovations that have already come out of India in the first chapter of our growth. And it is exponential now with mainstream adoption, with more access to education, with more partnerships with universities and academics. And I think that's where, just reinforcing what Seker has shared, where we're in a unique position. We are the largest. It's not just about liquidity, it's also about the resources that we can bring to support.
I just want to stay with that 11% number that you're talking about. I think that's a huge story, right? And that also tells you that it's a huge opportunity, both for India and for entities like Binance. So let me ask you, for this number to grow, right? The tech native population that you're speaking about, what role do you think companies like Binance or this industry as a whole can really play to take this number of 11% higher?
Well, I think as the role we play in the ecosystem is not just a trading exchange. We go far beyond that.
What are you, if you're not a trading exchange?
Well, we're an ecosystem. We're a platform, through our partners at Easy Labs, which is our investment arm. We're investing in the next generation of startups. We've invested, I think it's in over 10,000 over the last 8 years of our creation. Through B&B Chain, which is another, the layer one, we're helping builders, truly have access to the technology in order to be able to create those new Web3 technologies. And if you have that happening alongside what is retail adoption, it's the perfect ingredients for there to be some really exciting domestic innovations that come out of India.
But Seker, one of the things which I hear a lot when one speaks to foreign companies, like let's say yours, is that India is a very tough market. India is a very complicated market. India is a very complex market. Yes, we're a big country. We're a federal country. There's states and there's center and there is multi-party political ecosystem which exists. In your understanding, right? And given the fact that you're fourth generation Indian, right? 4 generations back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not going to ask you to tell the story right here at this stage of how that happened. But purely from the macro political and the regulatory framework, how big a challenge do you think it is for entities like yours?
Look, running a business is never easy, right? And APAC is a region. I can speak to APAC, right? Because that's the region I'm responsible for. APAC is a region where every single market is unique. And we respect the fact that sovereign nations have their priorities and they have their national priorities, right? And so our role as a business is to understand what those national priorities are, what the government of India, for example, wants to see in the next 10 years, work effectively with the government and put in place solutions that actually work for the market, right? That's just business sense. And so India is not a particularly difficult market. All markets are difficult to begin with, but you've got to break it down into bite-sized issues and then solve them one at a time. And so the difference, I think, with India is that, okay, well, maybe I can use some statistics to help, right? So digital asset adoption in India is pretty uniform. Now, if you split India into 4 quadrants, the north and the west are slightly ahead in terms of adoption, in terms of market share, right? And the east is slightly behind. But on average, they're not that far off from the 25 percentile, each of them. So what I'm trying to say is growth in India, or adoption in India, is pretty uniform. And that's not very common, right? Now we talk about cities, right? Usually, digital asset adoption tends to be very heavily concentrated in tier 1 urban cities, because that's where disposable income meets financial literacy, meets, sort of financial ambition, right? And the ability to take risks on new asset classes. Now in India, that proportion is actually a lot more even and a lot more spread out between tier 1, 2, 3 cities, right? So the interest in and the adoption in digital assets across India is more uniform than in most markets. Now, that's not a problem. That is actually an opportunity, right? And that is actually foundational for large-scale growth. That's how technology actually becomes, countries actually move to the next frontier of technology. Technology in and of itself doesn't solve anything. It's demographic adaptation to technology, adoption of technology that makes all the difference. And that it already shows that the trends are there. India has got a multitude of regulatory bodies, but the regulatory framework is pretty clear. And it's navigable. So, I disagree with the proposition that it's a difficult market. I think it's the opportunity and the foundation far exceeds any short-term challenge.
The reason why I raise this question, Rachel, is that, you spend your time in UAE, for instance. The feeling is that if you got to do really mega business, I want the crowd to join us in thanking Mr. Kaustav Dause, who's here, who's the principal advisor to the Maharashtra Chief Minister, who, by the way, has taken this ostentatious grand task of a number in a state's economy which we had never heard of, right? What's that, $1 trillion economy? So $1 trillion economy from one state, right, amongst a multitude of states, Rachel. I want to understand that when you hear a number like this, do you just dismiss this as, oh, this is political rhetoric? Or do you think that it's really possible in a country like India for companies like yours to be a participant in this growth story of a particular state?
Well, the reason, we see it as critical. The marriage and the partnership between private and public as we continue to go mainstream as an industry is critical to our future success. And working, and one of the roles that Binance has played over the last 8 years, and specifically over the last 3 years, is to act as educators and provider of resources, whether it be related to law enforcement, education that we do with, local regulatory bodies on how they can ensure that they're setting up, platforms and systems, successfully, whether it be with student education, whether it be, to Seker's point about tier 2 cities, like going into tier 2 cities with this concept and being able to bring financial education to them directly rather than expecting them to seek us out. And I think that marriage between public and private and between Binance and the local bodies here and the work that Seker and my colleagues, Raj, and the broader team are doing is critical to the future success, because we're here to learn and educate on ourselves on what the population needs here. And likewise, we can educate on what we see are the opportunities that other markets are taking advantage of, such as UAE or beyond, and potentially provide what are new opportunities, at the private level.
Well, let's look at those opportunities, and we'll have a chance of speaking to Mr. Dause subsequently. Land tokenization, for instance. I've been in Indian media, we've been looking at how states like Maharashtra are trying the level best to reimagine, revisualize land as an asset. Any thoughts from your side, Seker, in terms of what's the innovation you think that companies like Binance bring on the table when it comes to tokenization of land, or simply looking at land as a completely different, as a digital asset?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we can focus on land as an example, but it's an example of a much broader category of assets that are generally illiquid, generally fixed, generally difficult to fractionalize, right? And where the everyday person has difficulty accessing those asset classes, right? And so, so a lot of blockchain technology solutioning is basically building on top of existing layers, existing frameworks, right? So we've had REITs for a long time, real estate investment trusts, for a long time. What are REITs? REITs are collective investment schemes, right? So you take a property, whether it's land or it's a built-up property, you put it into a unit trust structure, and then you sell units of that trust to individuals. That's REITs, right? But historically, adoption in most markets has been low because of issues with land law, issues with the stability of the REITs, issue with REITs having very onerous regulatory requirements on them, right? So it's never really taken off in most markets. Now, what real-world asset tokenization can do is simplify a lot of that. So rather than going through 10 different government intermediaries to get to the point where you can issue a REIT, you now have an immutable ledger that's a permanent record of ownership. So transfer of title becomes easy. You can fractionalize it to whatever denomination you think makes sense in that context, right? And that makes distribution easy. So Binance, our role in sort of tokenization or tokenization projects primarily would be the distribution because of our network effect, right? So, for example, we've tied up with Franklin Templeton globally, and those kind of tie-ups are where the synergies between issuer at scale, and Franklin Templeton's a $1.6 trillion company in the asset securitization space. And so what they would partner with us for is actually our distribution effect and network. And so I think those are the strengths we can bring to the market. And we're going to see real-world asset tokenization take off, not just across land, but across commodities, agri-commodities, trade finance, any sort of receivables, et cetera. And it's just basically, at the end of the day, it's digital representation of your right to present value of money. Right?
So do I look at this, Rachel, as a fact that maybe land, we're sitting in the city of Mumbai right now, you could be in New York or you could be in London, and you could be looking at land as a universal asset? Is that what Binance is really moving towards?
Well, look, I think we design around what our users' needs are and what the needs are at a public and at a private level. So whether it be institutional investors that are using our platform for high volume transactions, or whether it be the individual who's sitting in Mumbai and wants to transfer money to a relative that's sitting in New Delhi and they want it to happen quickly. So we provide the rails, we provide the access to the technology, and then we will support, the projects that launch on our platform are then those that bring the true solutions to all of those issues that exist. So what I love about this space is where we are today, we could be, in 2 years' time, it will be so much more advanced in terms of where we're going. And the opportunity is so vast across every area of business, which is what is very exciting.
So are you basically saying that 2 years down the line when you come, you're going to book this entire hotel, right? I mean, that's the scale of vision and ambition.
You never know. We'd like to think big and be bold. That's one of the other values at Binance. So.
And you've been looking at India as a big story from a Bollywood standpoint. You were doing all your research about before coming to India. All
yes,
the notes
look,
that you
part
were,
of us being...
What's that web series that you were talking about? Bollywood Wives versus Splendid Lives. That's Rachel's research into India.
As a marketeer, I have to ensure that I go deep on cultural insights as well. But what's brilliant about that, I think the privilege I'm in as a marketeer at Binance is I have to understand the mindsets of our users. And I'm very privileged to have a great team here on the ground in India who's ensuring that they keep us up to date about what is the cultural zeitgeist here.
What are those two things you think matters most to Indians? Two things that matter most to Indians?
Oh, definitely Bollywood. And Bollywood, based on my interactions.
You got it right.
No, Bollywood and cricket. Bollywood and cricket definitely are the two. So, and the Irish team definitely doesn't have a chance against the Indian team.
You never know. You could be walking on the streets of Mumbai, and for all you know, you could run into Salman Khan or a Shah Rukh Khan. We'll prompt you there.
Depend, you'll have to educate me on those.
Who knows? But, Seker, coming back to the business side of it, you see, money, when it comes to money, as in any other country, a large part of dealing with money is about trust, right? How does an entity like Binance build trust for a community and a nation like India, where at the end of the day, truth be told, there is still a very long road ahead in front of us when it comes to educating the people, simply informing the people of this space. How do you build trust?
I think you earn trust, right? And it takes time. It's not an overnight thing. So I'll give you some categories of actions you can take to earn trust. And this is not just true for Binance, it's true for any financial services company, right? The first is in terms of asset protection, right? So in exchange context, custody of assets and safeguarding assets is going to be critical. That is the first pillar of trust. And so your global certifications come in relevant. Your SOC 2 Type 2, your ISO 27001, 27701, all of those certifications are industry stamps of approval that your infrastructure is actually robust, resilient, and scalable. That's critical. Number two, your user protection mechanisms, whether it's 2FA or more advanced technologies that basically keep your account safe, those become relevant. Number three, what is your sort of good faith mechanisms in place when accounts get breached despite all of these controls? And we have a 1 billion SAFU set-aside fund in the absence of insurance industry stepping up to backstop crypto industry, right? And so we've taken the initiative to do that, and I think Binance was the first to actually move in that direction. Number four is going to be user education and making sure the right products are made available to the right set of people. So user suitability assessment for more complex products is critical. And this is true of any financial service. So we assess users based on their skill, knowledge, experience, financial position to ensure that they're getting access to the right level of products that are commensurate with their risk profiles, right? And this is important because when you make the wrong set of products available to the wrong set of people and there are issues down the line, that also erodes trust, right? So this is long-term thinking. And finally, I would say your cooperation or your standing with local regulatory bodies, right? And the actions you take in that regard. So I'll give you some statistics. We have intervened and stopped effectively through real-time fraud monitoring up to $10 billion worth of assets at risk over the last couple of years. We've responded to 200,000 law enforcement requests around the world, legitimate law enforcement requests around the world. We have stepped in up to $4.3 billion worth of coin recovery mechanisms, right, for assets sent to the wrong address, etc. And I could go on and on. These are pretty staggering statistics by any yardstick, but for us, it's business as usual because we invest a lot of effort. 22% of our workforce is compliance-based, and that's a 30%-ish year-on-year growth on our compliance team structures. And we're willing to put in the work and the time and the expense necessary to build out what will be the dominant exchange for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So that's how you build trust, right? User protection, user mechanisms, stability, security of your infrastructure, compliance with local laws and regulations.
Just to double click on education, I would argue that's the most important foundation for us to build trust and is one of the reasons we're in the position we are today, nearing 300 million users. Our founders had the foresight to understand that this is a very complex space that is still, it can be complex and it can be challenging for users to understand how to enter into it. So, through Binance Academy, which is a platform that we have, think about it like a masterclass online, that really acts as a platform for those to help you meet where you are in your journey. So whether you be someone who's totally new to this space or whether you be much more advanced trader, we have modules and education on that helps you along and navigate, where you should be going in this space. And, we had 43 million people participate on that platform last year in one of the modules at least. And it's in 33 languages and we're pushing to scale it to more. And the reason that is so critical is if this is a space that's meant to empower people to make the right financial decisions. It's about entering into this in the right way. So alongside everything that Seker said, being able to ensure that users are being met where they are in their journey is how we're going to be able to arm them with the necessary information to really enter into the space in a way that is relevant for them.
I think these are absolutely great thoughts. So let me thank both of you for joining us today, and let's give a huge round of applause to both Seker and Rachel. And yes, hoping that Binance continues with its fantabulous journey here in India and rest of the world.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining.